Hi there and welcome to the channel and to this your October wrap, which this month is dedicated to a single writer, Shakespeare, my favourite. I read only Shakespeare in October, 6 of his plays in fact, and in this video I'll walk you through them. So we kick off with a comedy, Much Ado About Nothing, and I thoroughly enjoyed this. For those unfamiliar with the play, it concerns the matchmaking exploits of Don Pedro, who seeks to unite two pairs of young lovers, and he is ultimately successful, and the play ends with the traditional double wedding. However, as Shakespeare notes in A Midsummer Night's Dream, the course of true love never did run smooth, and that's particularly true in the case of the first pair of lovers, Hero and Claudio, and this is due to the machinations of Don Pedro's illegitimate brother, Bastard John, who is also in love with Hero, and he stages a scene for the benefit of Don Pedro and Claudio that makes it appear that Hero has been unfaithful to him. This intelligence is passed to Leonato, Hero's father, and the next day when everyone gathers in the church for the wedding, Leonato steps forward and publicly denounces Hero in front of the congregation. Hero is distraught. The sympathetic friar who was to have wed her steps in and spirits her away to a place of safety and announces to the world that she has in fact died, effectively of shame, and Hero is only reproduced after the details of Bastard John's plot are uncovered. The other pair of lovers are Benedict and Berenice, and their courtship is a war of words in which Beatrice, the sharp-tongued Beatrice, always gets the upper hand, and many critics prefer the scenes with Benedict and Beatrice to those with Hero and Claudio. Be that as it may, a magnificent comedy, Much Ado About Nothing, and I would rank this the second best of Shakespeare's comedies, the first being the incomparable As You Like It. Okay, after reading this, I thought I'd make a start on Shakespeare's history plays, and I wanted to read them in the proper order. However, I don't have a copy of King John to hand, unfortunately, so I began with the second one, which is King Richard II. And at the start of this play, a duel is about to be fought between two of Richard's nobles, and just as the men are about to commence combat, Richard steps in and says, no, we can't have this. What I'll do is I'll exile the pair of you, and you have to spend a certain number of years abroad, and then you can return. And so that's what takes place. But one of the two men, Bolingbroke, Henry Bolingbroke, returns at the head of an army while Richard is away fighting in Ireland. And Bolingbroke is extremely popular with the English people. And after reclaiming his property, he is able to actually depose the king, who is thoroughly unpopular. And then Richard is led away to be executed, and Bolingbroke becomes King Henry IV. And the most famous speech in this play comes from John O'Gaunt near the beginning, and it is a lament for England. And I'll just read it to you. You're going to know these lines, of course. This royal throne of kings, this sceptred isle, this earth of majesty, this seat of Mars, this other Eden, demi-paradise, this fortress built by nature for herself against infection and the hand of war, this happy breed of men, this little world, this precious stone set in the silver sea, which serves it in the office of a wall, or as a moat defensive to a house, against the envy of less happier lands, this blessed plot, this earth, this realm, this England. Truly stirring words. Okay, so after this play we have, naturally, King Henry IV, Part 1, but this doesn't really focus so much on the king as on his son, Prince Hell, who is hanging out with Sir John Falstaff, and indeed raising hell, if you'll pardon the pun, because they are drinking, thieving and whoring and playing the most outrageous pranks on one another. There are parts of this that are like a frat house comedy. Meanwhile, a rebellion is growing, which is being led by a dashing young knight, Sir Henry Percy, better known as Hotspur. And indeed, at the start of Henry IV Part 1, the king laments the fact that Hotspur is not his son in place of Prince Hell. So great a disappointment has his eldest son been to him. No matter, Prince Hal leaves John Falstaff and the boys, reports to his father and says, "No problem, Dad. I will go out onto the field of battle and meet Hotspur," which he duly does. And against all expectations, he prevails and slays Hotspur. And that's how the action of this play concludes. Naturally enough, the next play is Henry IV Part 2. And this begins in a really interesting way because rumour takes the stage to announce that she has sent a false report to Hotspur's family so that they believe their son triumphed on the battlefield. So the rebels mass for a final assault on the royal forces. And I just want to read you some of these lines that rumour utters because they are just beautiful. And the figure of rumour is based upon that found in Virgil's Aeneid. It's page 162 in this Arden 3rd Series edition. And it goes like this. "Rumour is a pipe, blown by surmises, jealousies, conjectures, and of so easy and so plain a stop, that the blunt monster with uncounted heads, the still discordant wavering multitude, can play upon it." Beautiful. Okay, so King Henry IV Part 1 and Part 2 are kind of formless to a certain extent, particularly the second part. However, the language is just wonderful, and it does feature the figure of Sir John Falstaff, who is pure box office. Every time he's on the stage, something funny is going to happen. So I greatly enjoyed these, despite the fact, as I say, they're not particularly well constructed. And then, of course, we move on to the moment when Prince Hal becomes king, and his history is in here. Henry V, which features his famous victory at Agincourt. And so this play is really grand in its scope, and I like the way the chorus functions, and it comes on stage at the beginning and tells the audience that they will have to employ their imagination to enjoy what follows. I'll just give you some of the opening lines from this. Okay, so, "Oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention, a kingdom for a stage, princes to act, and monarchs to behold the swelling scene. Then should the warlike Harry, like himself, assume the port of Mars, and at his heels, leashed in like hounds, should famine, sword, and fire crouch for employment. But pardon, gentles all, the flat unraised spirits that hath dared on this unworthy scaffold to bring forth so great an object. Can this cockpit hold the vasty fields of France? Or may we crown within this wooden O the very casques that did affright the air at Agincourt? O pardon, since a crooked figure may attest in little place a million, and let us, ciphers to this great account, on your imaginary forces work. Suppose within the girdle of these walls are now confined two mighty monarchies, whose high upreared and abutting fronts the perilous narrow ocean parts asunder. Piece out our imperfections with your thoughts." So it's beautiful, this appeal to the imagination of the playgoer. And King Henry V is probably, in terms of its plot, the very best of these plays, and it shows one of the most famous moments in English history. And then at the end, we move on to King Henry VI. So Prince Hal, Henry V, has died, and his infant son, well, not infant, young son, not a baby in arms, is the king in waiting, as it were. And here you see the squandering of the great victory that Henry scored, which secured for him the crown of King of France. And you also see that the Wars of the Roses are developing. But I have to say, and most critics agree, Henry VI Part 1 is one of the early Shakespeare plays in terms of its writing, and it's not particularly good. It's the most disappointing of the 5 histories that I've shown you. And that, ladies and gentlemen, concludes my reading for the month of October. I hope you enjoyed that dose of Shakespeare. It remains for me to choose the play I enjoyed the most. It's difficult. It's difficult. Oh, I do have to say that one thing that is good about King Henry VI Part 1 is it features Pucelle, who is based on the figure of Joan of Arc. Although gender-conscious scholars are really unhappy with the way she is portrayed as a witch and a sorceress throughout this text, but I'll just mention the fact that Joan of Arc, or Joan of Air as she's called in this play, is present. I'm going to choose as my play of the month has to be King Henry V. Yes, so book of the month for October is Shakespeare's King Henry V. And what am I going to read in the coming month? Well, you don't need a crystal ball to guess. It will be more of the histories. So King Henry VI Part 2, Part 3, and then we have King Richard III, I'm really looking forward to. And then finally, King Henry VIII. I have this slim Arden edition and a later Arden one, much thicker. Yes, and then finally, a disputed play in terms of its authorship, King Edward III, which most scholars agree Shakespeare had a hand in, but was not the sole author. And so yes, that will conclude my reading of Shakespeare's histories, just as I will now conclude this video by bidding you farewell in typical fashion. So, until the next time, be safe, be strong, nanu nanu.